I'm Kristen Gillis-Moyer from the Malago Foundation. Malago invests in scalable solutions to basic needs of the very poor. We are unabashedly obsessed with impact at scale. And I have to believe it's that focus on scale that once again has led me to be the moderator at the SCORE World Forum with the session with the most speakers. So we have 6 speakers today. And I'm really thrilled to have this role. 4 of our speakers are new to the SCORE World Forum, but I've told all of them that it's very unlikely there's anyone in the audience that's opposed to aha moments. If you are, you should reveal yourself because it means the fault lines go even deeper than we feared. But I did a lot of reading about breakthrough thinking and the neuroscience behind aha moments in preparation for this session. And then I waited for a really awesome introduction for the session to just come to me. And unfortunately for you, that never happened, because that's the thing about aha moments. So instead, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the neuroscience, because I think it's actually really interesting. So one of the studies that I read that I thought was particularly neat is from just last summer, coming out of Northwestern. And it basically showed that there are actually different parts of your brain that light up when you arrive at an insight or an aha moment versus when you use a really analytical problem-solving approach. So insight is in real contrast to deliberate, intentional answer seeking. So it's insight today that we're going to focus on more than conscious problem solving. Although aha moments usually do answer some kind of problem, particularly with social entrepreneurs. So I'm gonna ruin the surprise and just tell you that none of their aha moments are about realizing they were in love with their best friend, or the opening riff to an amazing new hit song. You're gonna hear a lot about solutions today, but it's getting to them through insight. That's really interesting. So the other important takeaway from that study is that if different parts of your brain are active when you have insight, it might mean, this is how all the scientists talk, if and it may, it might mean that you actually need to turn off the analytical part of your brain if you want to try and have an insight. So there's more and more research and inquiry right now going on into whether or not you can actually prime your brain to invite insight. So can you train your brain to have aha moments? And there's a recent new book by some friends of Malago, Judah Pollack and Olivia Fox-Cabane, called The Net and the Butterfly, that I just read recently, and it's really good, and it's consistent with everything else I read, so I want to share some of their takeaways, because basically it says, yes, absolutely, you can train your brain to have aha moments, and there are really 2 things you need to do, or 2 options or pathways you have if you want to train your brain to invite insight. The first one, you can probably all guess what it is. It's what you didn't do last night for as long as you would have liked to. You should do it for 8 hours. Can anyone guess what it is? Sleep, yes. So how many times have you heard someone say, you're struggling with something, somebody says, sleep on it, let it percolate. That is actually, the neuroscience supports that. You should do that. Your brain is literally restructuring itself at night. So sleep is actually one way to get to breakthrough ideas. The second is harder to guess, so I'm going to tell you what it is. If you can find activities that quiet or rest your mind, really kind of keep it busy and distract it from the analytical wheels turning, that can also invite insight. So a good thing to consider there, if you really want to make this relevant for your work, is you probably all were just thinking about how those things are relevant for you. But if you want to make it relevant for your work, think about your team. So think about whether or not, as a leader, you are creating space for enough team conversations that actually invite insight and don't just always try and approach things in an analytical problem-solving approach. Our team is trying to do even more of that. So today, we're going to hear short talks from each of our speakers about their eureka moments. Then I'm going to have a chance to ask them a couple questions about what they shared. And at the end, we should have time for a group discussion. Collectively, our aspiration is that all of you have lots of magical synaptic firing based on their talks. But the really good news for all of us is that even if you fall asleep during our session, we will be flattered because that will mean that you are really immersing yourself in the content this morning. So we're going to get started. So, and if nothing else, just because we want to make sure everybody learns one thing, and we were really inspired by yesterday, we're going to make sure that you learn everyone's favorite U2 song by the end of the day, too. Okay, so our first speaker is Kennedy Odedi. Kennedy is one of Africa's best-known social organizers and social entrepreneurs. He was raised in Kenya in Kibera, one of Africa's largest slums. There, he founded and leads Shining Hope for Communities. Shining Hope runs 2 tuition-free schools for girls that they use as a hub for other services in the community, like clean water. Kennedy and his wife, Jessica, also have a new book out called Find Me Unafraid that shares their story, and he's going to share a piece of that story with us today. So please welcome Kennedy and his aha moment from March 2004. Come up here.
I have to stand there. Oh. Whoa, okay. Whoa. Wow. Thank you so much, Christine. And it's very easy to be angry. Growing up in one of the largest slums in Africa, whereby my mother had me when she was 15 years old, being a woman in a tough environment. It was a tough life, that there's no food. There was not enough food in the house, violent, and even no toilets. So it was a really tough life for me growing up. And I became so angry with the system, and so angry with the way we used to live. It's so sad that to know that other kids are going to school. Those who have been to Africa knows that when kids go to school, they wear bright uniforms. I look at these kids, and my parents could not afford to send me to school. At the age of 10, I ran away, looking for independence, looking for some peace. On the street, at the age of 10, I was using drugs, anything that I could put my hand on, as a way to forget my struggle. I saw the violence. I saw my friends being killed by the police. But really what made me so sad is to know that I will never make it. Therefore, I lost that dignity. I didn't mind going to prison. I didn't mind dying. Because as I look around, I don't see anybody who have ever made it. But something happened. One day, when I got this job in the factory, I was 15 years old, and it was $1 for 10 hours. I used to walk from Kibera to industrial area, just hand to mouth. At the same time, I was so sad to know that the other side of the track, there were some kids with opportunity, there were some kids with opportunity who were able to have a better life. So that still also kind of made me so much angry and desperate. But I wanted to do something good, but I didn't know how. So one day, as I come back from my job, I went to a house of my friend who lived in a 10 by 10. His name is Calvins. Calvins hanged himself because of the same struggle. With a note written, enough is enough. I didn't know what to do. The same month, my sister, who I love, at the age of 15, got abused and became pregnant. The cycle of poverty. Kennedy's mom had me when she was 15. Now my sister is also having a baby at the age of 15. What do? The anger grew. But that note, that moment of reading that enough is enough, never ceased away from me. On my way from the factory, I found a young man, a young boy, who was selling a used soccer ball. and I bought it with 20 cents. That was the moment. And I realized that it's all about forgiveness. I have to forgive those who drew lifelong straw just because of where they were born. The randomness of the world. Some people were born in tough places just because of the family they're coming from. And I have to accept that's how life is. But I can't move on without forgiveness. It all started by forgiving. That's when Shofco, Shining Hope for Communities, was founded by this soccer ball that brought the community together in a way that we can change our own problems. If we put our head together, we can stop rape cases in our community. We can give that dignity to the community. Because what I've learned in this struggle was that poverty denies you dignity. Poverty makes you invisible. Poverty creates walls around you. By all those anger that I had, I cannot move on without forgiving. And I've seen what forgiveness can do. With my partner, Jessica, who is my wife, we are able to create this model that has created, we have a school for girls that's linked to social services. And it makes me so happy that to see through forgiveness that community can come together. And we have been serving now over 120,000 people. So it's all start with forgiveness. Thank you.
Kennedy, come back. Thanks. Okay, so we're all glad you found the soccer ball that day, bought that soccer ball, started Shining Hope for Communities. I found a blog that you wrote in college, and you said, I have amazing Google skills, really amazing.
Oh my God.
You said, my place in society is to bring transformation. I had to ask myself, is it only Americans and white kids from Europe who get to come to Africa and set up organizations? I said, no, Kibera can have its own brand, its own leaders and initiatives and community projects. If those kids can do it, we can do it even much better than them because this is our home. So first, congratulations. I think you were right, and you have done it. And second, there's a lot of Americans and white kids from Europe in the room at the Schoolwood Forum, leading organizations in places that are not their home. So what do you hope their aha moment is about how to work in a place like Kibera that's not their home? What do they need to remember?
Aha moment is that you have to know that we are equal in many ways, but at the same time, the things that divide us is also very important. So I think it's good to know that you are coming from a different environment, a different lifestyle, and you are going to a different community. And what I've seen is that people are trying to be colorless or to pretend that I'm just like a local person. You will never be, truth be told. No, in a good way. But I believe in partnership. My wife, Jessica, is from America. And I'm from the street, from Kibera. But I was very good in a lot of things, organizing people. Jessica is very good in making things happen. Without her, nothing will have happened. So I think that we have to accept that if all we bring together our hands, we can have a change. In the slums, for example, there is no opportunity. So Jessica Samuel is really open for us an opportunity. So I alone in the Kibera, you cannot do it. Locals alone, nothing. Americans, Europeans alone, nothing. But if they come together and remember the dignity.
Good. So Kennedy is a really gifted writer, so I'm going to use more of your own words. So
Oh my God.
he also wrote a New York Times editorial in 2010 called Slumdog Tourism that really brought you into visibility. I think that was when people really started to know who Kennedy was. So you said, slum tourism turns poverty into entertainment, something that can be momentarily experienced and then escaped from. People think they've really seen something, and then go back to their lives and leave me, my family, and my community right where we were before. Slum tourism is a one-way street. They get photos, we lose a piece of our dignity. Does that editorial still feel relevant to you today?
Yes.
Yes. So I want to ask a follow-up question about that. So it's many years later, and you've had increasing opportunity to tell your story, to tell the story of Kibera on a global stage. Thinking of that editorial, it seems to me there's a fine line between context and voyeurism, right? So when we invite you, when I invite you to share your story of hunger and homelessness and your mother's abuse and your sister's rape, how do you navigate the tension between that being a chance to tell your story and change the narrative of Kibera and feeling like more exploitation where your story of poverty is storytelling as entertainment again?
So thanks so much, Christine. Let's be honest to ourselves. If we look around, it's really hard. And the reason I'm standing here is because of the story now is being told in a warrior way. I mean, there's many times whereby my story, for example, is a story of people I know all the time in Kibera. But because they were not able to have that opportunity that I got, that can make me to speak my own story. Most of the time, people speak for them. So I feel really privileged to be able in this kind of a stage to talk about my story and the story of the community. And to ask the scholars always to bring more people with diverse, who are like me before.
You are a gifted communicator, Kennedy. So now I'm going to ask you an easy question. What's your favorite U2 song?
Another day!
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I can dance.
So, thank you, Kennedy. So you are changing the narrative of Kibera, so thank you.
Thanks.
Our next speaker is Josh Babarinde. Josh is the founder and chief executive of Cracked It, a social enterprise training young offenders to repair smartphones as a path away from gangs and crime. Josh graduated from the London School of Economics. He has been obsessed with government since he was at least 17. He's participated in lots of campaigns. He's worked for government ministers. He still regularly campaigns and is a convener of a group called More United, a movement that hopes to engage people to advance more tolerant politics. So Josh will take us back to his aha moment from April 2015.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name's Josh, I'm 23, and my aha moment came in April 2015. It was shortly after I'd heard this quote by Brazilian playwright and activist Augusto Boal, which said, "It is forbidden to walk on the grass, but it is not forbidden to fly over the grass." That is to say, you may have an objective, crossing the grass, there may be a barrier to it. There's a sign that says it's forbidden, but you can still cross the grass. You can fly over it. That's one such way. Innovate. And that's something that I've sought to encompass in my journey as a social entrepreneur so far. And so in that stead, I'm going to innovate with my presentation style right now and do a Pecha Kucha. Some of you will know that it's a series of 20 slides that automatically change after 20 seconds. So it's going to mean I'm really concise, but it will keep me on my toes, so wish me luck. We're on slide 3 now, so I've got to move on to number 4. So in terms of my background, I was working in this place, in Parliament, for a couple of MPs and ministers a few years ago, and I really enjoyed what I was doing. But at the end of the day, I was sat writing speeches, writing letters, and I was quite withdrawn from the issues that I was genuinely passionate about. I wanted to engage more with the grassroots. And so that's when I quit and decided to volunteer as a youth worker through an organisation called Year Here, working with young offenders in East London. And what I realized is that these guys and girls were just like anybody else. They wanted to earn money, they wanted to feel valued, they wanted to belong, but they didn't feel as though employment offered them the opportunity to do that. And so many of them turned to their next best or indeed only option to get those things, which was crime. Young people as young as 13 would tell me how they would go and deal drugs and secretly slip the cash they made into their mum's handbag to help her pay the bills. I was frustrated and saddened by this, knowing that 1 in 5 crimes in London are committed by gang members, and that many of these were falling into that. But at the same time, many were leaving school without the skills they needed to enter work. 1 in 4 16 to 25-year-olds in London were unemployed. So there were this galaxy of issues around a lack of motivation and skills to access work, and a galaxy of interventions to help address those kind of issues. But in my view, they were missing out on some core insights which undermined the extent to which they could be fully effective. And so I wanted to develop an intervention that would incorporate those things. One such intervention required something that took young people out of this Bermuda Triangle that they were right in. In our particular area of East London, there were tech centres kind of growing, this prosperity around us. But sandwiched in between were the young people I was working with who had no way of accessing this kind of tech prosperity. So I wanted to do something tech-focused. But secondly, a lot of these existing interventions were missing out on instant gratification. The idea that young people want to learn things quite quickly and see the payment of their results quite quickly too. They want to feel valued. So we had to work on this instant gratification piece. But as well as that, it needed to be a sustainable intervention. There are lots of things around that rely on government handouts or handouts from trusts and foundations, but as soon as that funding dries up, the intervention ends, and the young people's need doesn't end at the same time. Capitalising on a market opportunity ensures that interventions are sustainable. So I had this checklist of different things: income, belonging, self-worth, instant gratification, market opportunities outside of the Bermuda Triangle. And at the same time, I was going through a list of industries that we might be able to upskill young people in. Could we teach them to build websites or to code? And none of them were quite right until I got to phone repair. Does it provide income? Yes, you can make £30 per phone. Self-worth? Well, yes, people really want their phones repaired. It's a big part of their lives. Instant gratification? Yes, you can learn to do it in 5 days, and it takes 45 minutes to conduct a repair. Is there a market? Yes, 29% of smartphones are cracked. Eureka! This was the moment. This was fantastic. This was exciting. But I had a big barrier. How the hell do you repair a smartphone? So after watching many a YouTube video and convincing a global phone repair company to come and help us out, I launched my social enterprise, Cracked It. And we're a social enterprise smartphone repair company that trains and employs young offenders or those at risk of offending to service the 29% of unlucky individuals who have a smashed smartphone screen. And our aim is to support them to move away from crime and towards employment. And so what we do is we are contracted by local government and housing providers, each with a duty to upskill their populations. They commission us to run our training programs on estates across London. We train them to repair several different models of iPhone and lead them towards running their own public repair clinic, where they set the prices, they decide how their teams are organised, and they keep the money they make. Then, once they complete our program, we hire the most talented and proficient ones to come and work for us as technicians. We go into large corporates like Universal Studios and run day-long repair clinics where our young people get to make money, but also engage with the kind of organisations that they thought they weren't part of before. The results have been exciting. We were named London's best phone repair company by the London Evening Standard, and we taught this guy, the leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, to repair smashed phones. So if he doesn't make it to number 10, he's got another skill that he can fall back onto. The social impact has been really exciting too. 2/3 of our young people have started applying for work, having not done so before. And one such young person who secured a job is Callum here, one of our first trainees, who is now a toy demonstrator at Hamleys, the world's largest toy store. He's having an awesome time, and so am I, and it's because, like over the last 20 slides, I've been flying over the grass in my communication style. Over the last 20 months of working on this, I've sought to do that. And I seek to do that too in the future as I build Cracked It into a larger organisation and continue flying over the grass. Thank you very much.
Thanks, that was really good.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so Josh, I think there's probably a lot of people wishing you had a booth set up outside to fix themselves.
I'll give you my card.
One of the things I really appreciate about your talk is that you acknowledged kind of being surprised when you started meeting young offenders. And from my research in neuroscience of breakthrough thinking, there's also some assumption like it's really challenged and it leads to a breakthrough idea, right? So why were you surprised? Like what was the surprise there when you said they were just like everyone else?
I think two elements of surprise. Number one is that I was just under the impression that engaging in crime was wholly and entirely an active choice. I didn't really buy the argument that they were maybe pushed into it for one reason or another. Until I met some of these young people and they were telling me, you know, the story about slipping cash into their mum's handbag really added another human element to the story. But some who came from Muslim backgrounds said, look, like, I really don't like doing this. I don't like kind of making money illegally, haram money, they described it as. But the only way I can provide for my family is by kind of going against what my God tells me to do. And that's really, really a sorry state of affairs. So that's one thing that surprised me. But a second thing is that these guys and girls are pretty good when it comes to business. Like if they're dealing drugs, for example, they're great at networking, they're great at finding new clients, they're great at sales, they're great at employing staff, they're great at managing their money. And so one of the things I really wanted to do was find a way of like harnessing some of those like entrepreneurial skills they were using negatively and help displace it and use it in a more positive way. And it surprised me that we've actually been able to do that.
Good. I want to ask you about government because you loved government. You know, it's actually
well,
really.
I was a Liberal Democrat, so it didn't go so well.
Okay, so it's a little depressing. So you know, so many of the solutions social entrepreneurs are working on, in order to get to scale, government has to be a partner. So to hear that someone that was working with government was excited about doing that, decided like I can't be in government anymore, is actually a little bit depressing. So. Like, why did you give up on government, or have you given up on government?
I definitely haven't given up on government. I mean, I left, but I'm convinced that the government has a really important role to play, like in this space. In my view, one of the like key roles government can play is as an enabler. You know, we've just talked about the importance of insight. I'm not convinced that government has all of the insights. The insights are on the ground. They're with people who have experienced issues directly, you know, as Kennedy was explaining, or people who have like put themselves in positions where they can more easily empathize with people facing social challenges like I did. And so I think government has a really important role to play in empowering people like Kennedy or I and the rest of us in this room to get those insights, to harness them, and to design solutions with the communities that we're seeking to work with to kind of generate social impact.
So there's hope.
Yeah, there's absolutely hope. In the age of Brexit and Trump, there is hope.
Okay, so let me ask you, so Cracked It right now has worked with 63 young offenders, is that right? It's still really new. Josh is the only full-time employee. What has to happen next to really become like a system level change in terms of how young offenders are engaged? Like, can Cracked It do that?
Well, we're trying. So, I mean, there's kind of two things that Cracked It needs to do to have a kind of more system-based impact. One is just grow. It's just me right now. We're just about to hire a second member of staff. And we need to be working with more corporate organisations with whom we can partner to go in and run our repair clinics. As we do more of those, I think we'll be able to kind of have our fingers in more pies and more people can work out what we're doing. Crucially, see that young offenders or those at risk of offending have something positive to offer. But secondly, we're learning so much through working with these young people. And we want the decision makers in government to realise what we're doing. and to use it to inform policy. And we've started to make some moves on that. So we're members of the Employers Forum for Reducing Reoffending, which is a Ministry of Justice administrated body. We sit alongside like national employers where we feed into policy discussions about how government can best empower businesses and other organisations to take on offenders and help change their image. So we think that by kind of working at the bottom upwards, but also trying to start at the top and work down, somewhere in between we're going to get to a point where we're best poised to have that system-based impact.
Spoken like a true social entrepreneur.
And politician,
yes,
maybe.
And politician. Okay, so last question. What is your favorite U2 song?
Sometimes You Can't Make It on Your Own. It's my favorite one.
Good one. I don't know that one. Okay, thank you, John.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Ruth Makala. She goes by Lute. Lute joins us from Zambia, where she serves as a social marketing regional coordinator for a USAID-funded project. She has spent most of her earlier career focused on sexual and reproductive health. She's a graduate of the University of Namibia, and she majored in media studies and political science. So she served as a 2015-2016 Global Health Corps Fellow with the Society for Family Health in Zambia. Global Health Corps was founded by Barbara Bush, who just gave that whoop noise from the corner, who's here today to create the next generation of global health leaders focused on health equity. So since 2009, almost 750 Global Health Corps Fellows have worked at 120 institutions, from grassroots NGOs to ministries of health in 7 countries. And Lute will take us to her aha moment in August 2012 that led her to the path of being one of those fellows.
Yay! Oh my goodness. Disclaimer, I don't have a favorite U2 song. So I'll just go for Another Day and sometimes what?
Sometimes you can't make it.
Sometimes you can't make it on your own, Kristen. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ruth, as introduced. And growing up as a child, I was surrounded by friends who had career goals. You know those goals you would hashtag career goal, and you would endorse those goals. So they wanted to be doctors, lawyers, nurses, pilots, engineers, you name it. But for me, I wanted to be the first that showed up on your screens at 7 p.m. reading the news. 10-year-old me did not even know they were called newscasters. So whenever somebody asked me, what would you like to be when you grow up? I'd be like, I want to read the news. And my reasons were pretty simple. I wanted to be a newscaster because newscasters are confident, they're beautiful, they're well-spoken, plus they seem as though they know what they're doing, and they're famous. And I really wanted that package. Like, I wanted it so bad. I was really never exposed to information or books about current affairs. So my goal was pretty simple. Get a job that was going to make me very successful, hopefully as a newscaster, and be a part-time do-gooder who performs some acts of kindness. Never did I ever dream I would find a meaningful career in being a global citizen. I went on to pursue a Bachelor of Arts in Media Studies, hoping that I end up on TV. And I chose political science as my second major because I wanted to understand the sphere that has so much influence on our lives. I was a loud child with strong opinions, so my parents were convinced this was a perfect match for me. Though they always questioned what career opportunities I would have, and quite frankly, I think they thought my big mouth was going to get me in trouble one day. I found myself loving every aspect of the media world, and the more I explored the political world through my studies, the more I realized that this is exactly what I was meant to learn. My perspective and understanding of life and society changed when I was introduced to this man who swept me off my feet. This man, ladies and gentlemen, is the great philosopher John Rawls, and he presented to me a theory of justice as fairness. Now you have to understand that before John Rawls, justice to me was a picture of a courtroom with a judge, a prosecutor, a defendant, a victim, and the accused all rising. To me, this is where justice was served, and learning of John Rawls' theory opened my eyes to a different and broader understanding of justice. And from that day, I longed to see this justice in action. 2 years fast forward, I sat in an interview for Global Health Corps, and one of the interviewers asked me, "What does social justice mean to you?" And without thinking about it, my response was justice as fairness. It was in that exact moment that I realized that the major reason I was drawn and so desperately wanted to be part of the health equity movement was to serve justice in the untraditional way. I mean, the fellowship and these people, these strangers, were telling me I could advocate, stand up for people, speak for people, and be the voice of the people without actually being a lawyer. I was going to save lives without being a doctor, and I was going to use my communication skills to fight for what I believe in. And I was marveled. It was like this is the heartbeat of the place where I knew I belonged. When I joined Global Health Corps, I felt at home. I started identifying myself with everything that the movement stands for. When I got here, I stopped searching for a place to belong and started expanding and exploring all the rooms of global health. I recall sitting in one of my media classes, learning about all the amazing work marketing and advertising agencies are doing out there in terms of brand promotion. Let's talk about Samsung, Coca-Cola, Apple, never mind the PR displayed in the US drama scandal. I remember thinking to myself, I would like to be part of those teams. But after my aha moment, I wanted to be part of a team that was promoting the ultimate brand, a brand beyond and above all brands, health as a human right. Now, the medical profession has long been portrayed as having great power and authority in the health arena. This underplays the social, political, economical, and environmental factors that are determinants of health. If we continue to believe health to be primarily an individual rather than a social issue, support for policy-oriented approaches is likely to be limited. We must envision a more equitable sharing of systems between governments, the corporate civic worlds, and individuals, because today's global health challenges require a much more coordinated response from actors across sectors, boundaries, and disciplines. Now, having spent my early career in communication, I am glad and so happy to have found my place in the health equity movement. My political side believes that the way society and the economy is governed is of high importance, and I am committed to making sure we do this better. My media side, though I am not on TV, my media side packages and distributes accurate and quality information while sounding the loud cry. Everyone deserves access to quality health care. Now you have to smile at me, you're making me nervous. I might take off my heels. I might take off my heels. Now, if there is room for someone with my skill set in the health equity movement, there is definitely room for anybody. I was going to end with a quote by Nelson Mandela or Bill Clinton, but I am too nervous. I might not quote it correctly. But I will say this. Someone once said, health is wealth. And if health is wealth, why don't we make it a human right? I implore you and welcome you to join me as a health advocate, a change maker, and above all, a global citizen. Thank you.
Okay, so Lute, you beautifully captured the notion of justice as fairness. But in a world with these seismic fault lines that range from gender to economic inequality, why do you equate justice specifically with health equity?
You know, there's this notion, and people are always saying education is the equalizer. But I would like to think of it this way. If there are two, me and Josh, for example, I'm healthy and he's not. But he has, and we both have access to health. We both have access to free education. Who do you think is going to benefit from that system? The healthy one or the unhealthy one? Obviously, the unhealthy one is not going to benefit because they'll spend most of their times at home, being taken care of and stuff like that. So I'd like to think of it as this way. Health should be an equalizer because, I mean, all lives are of equal worth. So I think, yeah.
So a health equity movement sounds lovely. I think we all sign up. We're all bought in. At Malago, we really believe impact comes from behavior change and people doing something differently. So movement means you got to move people to do something. So what specifically are you hoping people do differently?
I mean, it has to start with the realization. Paul Farmer once said, the fact that people think that their lives matter more than the others, I'm not quoting it correctly, but I'm paraphrasing it, is exactly what's wrong with this world. Your life is not worth more than the next person. And once you start believing that, and then I think that's where it all starts, when you have that realization.
I think you said the fact that people think some lives are worth more than others is the root cause of all that's wrong in the world.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So,
thank you.
Maybe. I know you said John Rawls swept you off your feet. You started your career with a fellowship. Did you know he started his career with a fellowship too? You did. Do you know where he did it?
No.
Oxford. At Oxford.
Okay. I'm coming to Oxford. I'm coming to study here.
So I just thought you might like to know that both of you started on the same path.
Oh, great.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Chuck Slaughter. Chuck, I'm going to grab the clicker. Chuck learned his first lessons about sales and distribution as a paperboy, growing up in Connecticut. Later, he fell in love with faraway lands and people while leading overseas bike trips during breaks in school. These two passions have driven him ever since. He's a proven businessman. He's a successful investor. He's also a donor that has guided the Horace Goldsmith Foundation to invest more in social entrepreneurs. But what he's best known for this week in Oxford is that he's a 2016 winner of the Skoll Award for Social Entrepreneurship as founder of Living Goods, working to save lives in communities. So what you might not know also is that early in his career, Chuck spent time as a program officer with Trickle Up, a microfinance organization, which took him to Nepal, Indonesia, and India. Travel inspired Chuck to found TravelSmith, a clothing and travel gear company that had sales of over $100 million before Chuck sold it. Those travels also offered a unique glimpse into how micro enterprises work, insights that helped inform Living Goods many years later. So Chuck will take us to his aha moment from July 2006.
Thanks. And Kennedy, I'm one of those Mzungus from California. I'm one of the gringos, so forgive me. Just a little bit. I'm blown away by every story I've heard so far. All I could do just to keep my composure sitting there, which makes it a little bit harder standing here. Okay. The moral of my story today is be careful who you have a beer with. In the summer of 2004, I just sold TravelSmith, and I just become a dad. And I committed to myself I was going to take some time off, relax, enjoy being having my new family, and wait for my muse to come about what I might want to do next in life. And I found myself at a party in the Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. And at this party, I met Danger Man. Danger Man is actually a guy named Dan German, who just happens to have the coolest Gmail address on the planet. And Dan had also sold a business, and we were having our beer, and I made the mistake, the really fatal mistake of telling him that I was really interested in coming back to the social sector. And he told me about this organization that he was supporting in East Africa called CFW Shops, which was using a franchise model to try to expand access to basic medicines. And I thought, that's really cool. Here's a way of using business principles to really solve a big, hairy social problem. And one thing led to another. My wife and I gave some money to this. Dan persuaded me to join the board. And then he asked me to come over to Africa to see it, to see what I could do to help. And what I found when I got there were 60 shops like this. And the unfortunate thing was that most of them were failing financially rather badly. And they weren't having terribly much impact. And I remembered something that my first grader taught me, which was this little exercise they teach you in first grade, which is, I notice, I wonder. Which is a good place to start when you're looking for an aha. Introduction to science, if you will. And what I noticed was that, like the owner of this shop, there was about half the time they were treating patients, and about half the time they were waiting for sick people to walk into the door. And I thought maybe there's a solution to this problem. You can solve both of these issues here. And so we did a little experiment. The I wonder was, what if we got them out of the store, into the communities, going door to door, going to schools and churches and so forth. And so we concocted a very simple little promotion. We were going to screen every kid in these neighborhoods for diseases and then offer a promotion. I come from the merchandising world. You got to offer a discount on a bed net. A lot of kids have malaria. Lo and behold, the uptake on this promotion was that 2/3 of the families bought a mosquito net. And that led to another what if, which was, yeah, okay, that worked pretty well. What if we got rid of the store altogether and just went door to door? And I'm like, hold the phone. Isn't there someone else who's thought of this little business idea before me? And one's thoughts turned to Amway and Tupperware and, yes, Avon. And I went back and I did my homework, and what does one learn? Well, Avon started in the US in the 19th century. What was it like? Mostly rural, agricultural. There was poor access to quality, important products, and women were looking for a source of cash income. And I'm like, well, there's some similarities here to where we're working. And this, of course, is the moment of inspiration that led to Living Goods. And at that point, of course, I also asked the question, what do I need to do next? And obviously, I had to become an Avon lady, which is what I did. And I donned my bag, and I learned a few tricks about selling makeup. So flash forward, 10 years later, Living Goods is now serving 5 million people across East Africa, with 6,000, actually 500 now, it's ticking every day, community health workers. At the same time, the sort of storefront models are very hard to grow. That one has stayed at 70 or 80 shops. We have gotten the cost of this down to $2 a person. That means that a family of 5 can get comprehensive home health care for $10 a year. And we've proved through independent research that it's reducing child mortality by 25%. This is a big problem, though. We can't solve it alone. So part of our core philosophy is, how do we help others replicate and expand this? And so we are now working with 3 of the largest NGOs who are replicating this in other places. And I'll share just one of my favorite examples of progress, which is that last year, 50 of the health workers who we support in Uganda ran for public office. And many of them won. So this founding aha moment, I think, for Living Goods led to what became our core philosophy, which is to continually look for ideas that have the potential for ground-shaking impact, but that can be tested quick and cheap. And so if I were to leave you with my thought about this topic, it's that epiphanies, I think, a little bit don't come by chance. They don't come by a muse magically alighting on your shoulder. They come really from trying a lot of shit. So that's my plan, to continue trying a lot of shit, and that's my recommendation.
Okay, so we all know how successful you are, so I want to talk about a failure. So after you graduated from Yale with a degree in architecture, you decided to open a bike shop. It failed. I'm just wondering, as you walk around Oxford, do you maybe want to give it another shot here? If you do, I'm in.
All right.
Location.
Yeah. Well, I'm 0 for 1 on bike shops,
No.
and I'm 0 for 1 on being a filmmaker, and I'm 0 for 1 on a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And
Well, I want to ask you about that.
yes.
So a lot of people, so you failed that early. That was one of the first things you tried. It failed. A lot of people never would have tried to do anything again.
Oh.
So how do you? What's your insider tip for how to be open to the fact that any time you go down a path, it might be a dead end, and you just got to start again?
I had to, I remember when you asked that question earlier, I remember asking almost the same question to one of our health promoters in Nairobi. And I said, she was one of the most successful health promoters. I said, how did you do it? And particularly when it's hard early on, when you've become a health promoter, before you were doing something else, and you got to get people to trust you with their health. And I said, what's your secret? And she had just like the pithiest one-word answer. She said, persistence. Failure is a part of success, so if you're not failing a lot, you're not on your road to success.
Yeah. So the other thing I want to ask you is, I remember talking about Living Goods at least 5 years ago, and you said you would never work with government. You said, the whole point here is government has failed to deliver. We're trying to prove another model. We won't work with government. So fast forward, and today in Kenya and Uganda, government is a really important partner for Living Goods.
You make me eat my words.
Well, I'm just interested. I'm interested in what you can share about the fact that sometimes you also have to be open to changing course on what's a really core tenet of your model, because not everyone is good at doing that. So how do you stay open to that?
Well, it helps to have a wife who continually points out your shortcomings in a gracious, very helpful way. But and a 13-year-old now who's gotten even better at that. But we're on a path, and the path is to impact at scale. And the health sector is one that really is you put health and education and roads, and clean air. And this really has to be, the government has to have ownership of these areas. And the question really, I think, which came slowly to me and now has become a conviction, is not if you should work with government. The question is how.
Yeah.
And we're on a journey about that. And I think the first big piece of that for us was working on the regulatory space. The solution to expanding health equity, a lot rests in expanding what basic door-to-door healthcare workers can do.
Yeah.
And so the first piece of that journey for us was working with the Ugandan government and getting them to expand to allow health workers to treat malaria, to do blood tests, to give hormonal contraceptives, and so forth.
So I think the way I see it
Yes.
is also that you have changed course a lot, but you have always stayed clear on your mission, which is to save kids' lives. So when you're really clear on that, you can iterate a lot on how you actually get there.
Yes, very true. Yeah.
So what's your favorite U2 song?
So it's actually not a song, it's a performance.
Okay.
That U2 did, I can't remember, after Katrina, they came and did a fundraising performance with Green Day, and they did a stirring rendition of The Saints Are Coming. And if you haven't heard it, YouTube it.
Okay, we will.
It'll move you.
Thank you, Chuck. A lot of people want to have a beer with you now.
Be careful.
So our next speaker is Julia Ormond, the founder and president of Alliance to Stop Slavery and End Trafficking, or ASSET. A role she came to after being the first person to serve as the UN Goodwill Ambassador to combat trafficking and slavery. Julia and ASSET were the source, co-sponsor, and organizer behind the passage of California's Transparency in Supply Chains Act, which was landmark legislation that changed the way multinational companies report on human rights and procurement practices. Julia, of course, also has a rich resume in the world of stage, film, and television, which some of you may recognize her from. But what you wouldn't have seen is her role behind the scenes founding Film Aid International, or her Emmy Award-winning role as executive producer for Calling the Ghosts, a story about rape, war, and women. She has, for years, given voice to suffering and the voiceless end of the supply chain, and we're very glad that she'll lend her voice to our session today. Julia would take us to her aha moment from April 2006.
I'm kind of blown away by the stories that I'm hearing, but thank you for to Skull for asking me and having me. My aha moment is a bit random, but I hope my story will show that I kind of believe in random. And like most people, my initial engagement around the issue was random. I started in the late 1990s looking at the issue of sex trafficking with Gillian Caldwell, and then by 2005, I was supporting and celebrating NGOs through an organization, Vital Voices, at their annual event at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. And it was their co-founder, Milan Verveer, who called me and said, would you be interested in becoming a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador against trafficking and slavery? And I immediately said, absolutely no way. And I said that not because I'm an awful human being, although maybe some people at Skull Forum might think, oh, that's awful. But I said that because at the time, the picture that we were seeing was that the vast majority of this was sex trafficking. And it's not that I didn't think, yes, that's urgent to solve, that's devastating for the individuals. It was because I couldn't see solutions to it, and I felt that that was vital. I saw it as a government and a police enforcement challenge. And I said to Milan, I can't see the solutions to this, and I can't see my personal connection to it. And so no, and she very sweetly said to me, get over yourself and get out there, take on the role and use it to investigate and get a bigger, deeper picture. And so all of my trips have taught me that probably the only accurate presumption that I can have is that I will never get beyond my inaccurate presumptions. And the first one, the underlying one that I had, was that I was blessed because I lived in a country that respected human rights. And I was free and I was privileged because of this random luck of where I was born. And yes, that was awful, but that I wasn't causing it. And I think that was what was underneath it. The first trip that I took, however, was to Lake Volta in Ghana. Lake Volta is the second largest man-made lake in the world. When they created the lake, they didn't clear the trees, so the fishing there is fantastically difficult. You can see it's this bizarre landscape with these sodden tree trunks sticking out of the lake. And local NGOs there had discovered this issue and taken action against it because of the numbers of children's bodies that were washing up on the shores. So I went to meet with them. Sorry, one of those white people going out there. I went to meet with them, and I met with child survivors who told me about how they were beaten with oars in order to make them dive deeper into these cold and dangerous waters, sometimes at night, to disentangle the nets that were caught on the trees, and how they had to calm fish as big as their arm span, and they would do it by finding the face of the fish and squeezing the eye sockets to calm it. And the trick was to not get your fingers trapped in the gills, because then the fish could overpower you, and that's how they'd watch their friends drown. And sorry, note to self, learn your script. So there are thousands of these kids believed to be trapped on little islands in this vast lake. But we went to look at it at the shore, and I knew that I knew not to expect that I was going to see guns and chains, that this was about coercion. But I didn't expect not to be able to see it at all. And I found myself as, yes, the now heavily sweating, horrible white European lady with her presumptions, looking at this person that they were looking at and thinking, well, I'm completely confused because he seems quite healthy and robust to me. And obviously my underlying presumption was that I was going to see somebody emaciated and starving as an indicator. And eventually I had to confess, I'm sorry guys, I don't know what I'm looking at. I can't see it. And what they described is, the boy is this guy here on the left. What they said is, we can tell from his height, he's probably about 12 years old. But he's built like a man, right? He's really muscular. That tells us that he's probably done about 5 years of hard labor. That's a child at risk. I wouldn't have seen that. And it was actually talking to local experience that helped me see that, and many other presumptions. Now, I got to walk away, but as I did, I asked slightly uneasily, where does this fish that they catch, or they're forced to catch, where does it end up? Like, have I ever eaten this? I was brought up on fish fingers. You know, have I ever actually eaten this fish? Could I have paid for it? Have I ever fed this fish to my child? And I realized when I got home, they went kind of quiet. I realized when I got home, I couldn't find out, because companies aren't required legally to disclose that information. And my other trips around the world started to support the idea. Yes, it is. It's in almost every country in the world, and it's in almost every product supply chain. And suddenly my so-called blessed free life, which was completed by my cell phone, my computer, my car, my coffee, my clothes, my food, my whatever, was supporting a system that trapped people, most likely at some point, in enslavement and forced labor. And it completely debunked the myth of my freedom. Martin Luther King talked about how all life is interrelated, that we are tied together by a single garment of destiny, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I still find those words incredibly inspirational. They're very moving to me, they're very special, but I struggle as a regular human being to feel that I am implementing that in daily steps and daily choices that I'm able to make. I don't know how to walk that walk. But as we walked towards the lake, the NGO that I was working for spotted a suspected trafficker, and they said, come on, we're going to talk to him. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to feel not just sweaty, but anxious. And I've come all the way from the Kennedy Center, Washington, DC, and I've traveled all the way to Africa to try and find this connection. And I'm actually just feeling scared and not very goodwill ambassadory. And we get to the thing, and I'm like, what am I going to say to him? I haven't really thought about that. And I'm scared because I am worried about the danger aspect. And I'm completely disarmed because when I look up, I see this young man with a fresh, open, smiling face. And it's completely not what I'm expecting. And then I see his T-shirt. And it said the Kennedy Center, Washington, DC. And some people, if I share that story with them, will go, huh, weird. And they're totally entitled to feel that way. But for me, everything kind of stopped. And yeah, it was really humbling, and it was really moving for me. My aha moment helped me answer my question, who is doing this? All of us. And it helped me have conversations with the traffickers as well as the trafficked. And I asked this ex-trafficker, what was your aha moment? What was the thing that inspired you or helped you to free yourself and liberate yourself and come out? And he said, it was when they asked me, would you do this to your own child? I thought, oh, okay. And it took me a while to realize that I was enabling my life. I was enabling the life of my own child while putting other children around the world at risk and their families, maybe even fatally. And that it was meeting these people face to face and talking to them, sharing that narrative, sharing those stories that really brought that home to me. I was a concrete participant in global economic apartheid. We now know that for every one person forced into the sex trade, 4 people around the world are forced to work. The selling of children is the fastest growing global crime. My aha moment helped me to come home, found the organization Asset, and we work on systemic solutions. And we chose to originate a legislative solutions, one of many in the space, that is the Transparency in Supply Chains Law. And this is a consumer rights disclosure law that requires the major manufacturers of California to disclose what their practices are throughout their global product supply chain to eradicate trafficking and slavery. With a lot of help and a lot of support, it passed in 2010, came into effect in 2012. Of the recent evaluation of, we've evaluated 1,961 companies incorporated by the law, which doesn't sound like a lot of companies. We recently found out it's evaluated as $48.4 trillion in global trade. Thanks to the Transparency in Supply Chains Law going global, it's now incorporated in the UK Modern Slavery Act. It's now 20,000 companies. And our hope and our work is to increase the understanding of what that is, what disclosure is giving us in order that we can continue to break denial. I do believe it's helped break denial. And I believe it's a tool to propel solutions going forward. My aha moment, I think, helped me because I went out to Ghana with a bunch of horrible white presumptions, clearly, and with a bunch of questions. And so now when people ask me, where is it worst, I say, in my own home. Who is doing it? Me. Why is it happening? Denial. And who can solve it? All of us. And it has to be all of us because one person in isolation is not going to ever be enough. It's not going to stop it from happening. So the ultimate aha moment for me was that with the right information, helped by ever-evolving transparency and the right skill set interpreting that information, can move us towards a solution for all of us so that on a daily basis, every time we make a choice and spend $1 or €1 or £1 or a ruble, we can vote for the world that we want. I need to. Okay. My water bottle.
Okay. Thank you. So, I just want to ask you one question around the Transparency in Supply Chains Act is something you're so proud of and is so important. I want to see if you can help make it clear for everyone. Since it's really not about blaming and shaming, it's about exactly what it sounds, transparency. Like, how do you see that leading to the real change that you're hoping happens?
Well, obviously, we've got a long way to go with it. This is the California version is step 1. It's a foot in the door. It's not the complete story. And I almost put a slide up that said, beware of the bull. Because what we found is that companies own land rights, factories, farms. Where people work is a land right issue. You're not allowed to just walk in, find the person in trouble and walk them out. It's more complicated than that. And so what we need, transparency is a window into the practices that companies are using. And that transparency to me is agnostic. It's an agnostic open source tool. And agnostic sounds kind of cold. It's basically universal. If you're somebody that wants to use protest, that is angry about it, that wants to use that methodology, it can help us rate companies by what they're doing. So I think it creates a market for solutions to get traction. And I think that I really think it's a way forward to help us see who's doing what. And then we can start as consumers to support people who we think are doing the right thing. And it challenges companies who otherwise were able to hide behind the fact that nobody was talking about it. You have great actors in the space who would say to us, we don't want to talk about it. It's like we're going to look like the bad guys by stepping up and talking about forced labor in our supply chains. And the others are just sort of sitting there going, go on, that'll affect your brand. Now I think there's an increasing level playing field that enables them to do that and start to share best practices. And it's left to the others. If you don't think this is your problem and you trust that your consumer is still going to go with you, go for it. I don't think that's sustainable, but I can't persuade every one of them round to my opinion, and I don't think you have to.
Yeah. So what's your favorite U2 song?
I had to look it up. Iris, Hold Me Close.
Thank you for sharing your personal journey with us.
Thank you.
So we have one more speaker. She is Christine Su, the founder and CEO of PastureMap. PastureMap is a for-profit startup helping farmers and ranchers manage their cattle on healthy grasslands. She's working with 6,000 ranches in 26 countries. Christine is a self-proclaimed data nerd whose prior experience at McKinsey and the private equity firm KKR included things like running manufacturing operations for an Apple supplier in Southeast Asia and managing a sales force across 40 cities for a $2 billion startup in China. Christine has 3 Stanford degrees, so if you need one, she can probably give you one. She's also part of Milaggo's first cohort of fellows working for better, faster conservation solutions. So our team is really proud to see a conservation-focused social entrepreneur and startup represented on stage at the Skull World Forum. So, Christine.
Thank you. So my story begins with cheese. So I had a very serious bout of food allergies in college back in 2007 when I was at Stanford for the first time. And I had these scaly rashes that would appear after I ate, and we weren't sure what it was, but my lips would blow up and it all over my upper body. And the doctors didn't know what to do with me, so they just said, take a strict vegan elimination diet, which was incredibly difficult for me because, as I mentioned, I love cheese. So I would find myself sneaking out on the weekends to farmers markets in Palo Alto and Mountain View, which is very fortunate to have a great set of local farmers and ranchers to eat from, trying to find cheeses that wouldn't make me break out in hives. And that was my first foray into the sustainable food system, realizing that that kind of food is very different from what I can get at the supermarkets, right? So this is fundamentally, I eat aligned with my values and the values of the ranchers who feed me, mostly raise their cows on grass, right? And I learned that the closer that the farmers that I respected farmed with nature, the better it was for both my health as well as for the ecosystems that we live in. So I became an obnoxious sustainable food nerd, right, who talked to everybody about this, but only in my spare time. And meanwhile, I went to all these firms and had a business career, and fast forward 5 years, I'm in Hong Kong working in private equity, and I'd just gotten promoted, and I was celebrating with my dad, and took him to a swanky whiskey bar, and we were celebrating, and he said, this is kind of the pinnacle of where you're supposed to be. Are you happy? And I hadn't asked myself that question for my entire career, for the past 5 years. And my immediate gut response was, of course I'm not happy. I haven't seen a blue sky in 10 months. I work 80 to 100 hours a week, and I run factories. And I love making data accessible to frontline people to make them feel empowered, but everything else in my life is not aligned, right? And going to these different cities and seeing what I thought was rural China would be blue skies, it's all very polluted. And then seeing the ramifications of industrialization and the pursuit of shareholder return as an end in itself at 26, I was like, this can't be the answer, right? If I'm not happy at 26 doing this, and there just has to be a moral guiding compass above and beyond what we're pursuing. And around this time, oh, by the way, this is very smoggy, right? I couldn't see outside my own window on most days because of the pollution. And by the way, I was breaking out in hives again because provenance of food is really hard. Transparency is really hard in the Chinese food system. And so my whole body was rebelling against what I was doing. And around this time, a college friend emailed me this spring picture of spring in Northern California. And there's rolling hills and there's cows. And I was just like, I need to get back there. So I did what every private equity associate does after they burn out, which is I went to go work on a dairy farm in northern Japan, and I shoveled manure and herded cows and milked them and was very happy. And then I went back to Stanford for a joint MBA and a land use and agriculture degree. And knowing that I didn't come from a farming family and that I didn't know very much about what farmers did, I went and worked on every farm I could across 4 different continents. And I talked face to face with 1,500 farmers and ranchers over the course of 3 years. And I kept coming back to seeing this thing on a barn wall. And this is the state of the art for grazing management, which is how folks run their farms. Planning with a pen and pencil, and you plan with your pencil, and then when you actually do what where you rotated the animals, you fill in with pen. And I remember looking at that over and over again, and at some barn wall someday, I had a second aha moment, which is that my operational training and what I had gone through in being an operations data geek could help with this. This is what I was brought here to do. And the frustration of farmers who are aging out around the world, the average age of farmers in the US is 60, and it's in a lot of countries in the world, and the lack of a new generation, the lack of digitized knowledge that people can pass on to the next generation to train them up, but also the lack of information empowerment that can make themselves productive from year to year is huge. Most farms run on pen and paper. 99% of farms are family smallholders. And so that was the insight that led me to build PastureMap, which is frankly just a really simple way to do that, but in technology, right? So the ability to increase productivity on farms is well researched. It's like that science of delivery stuff we heard about in the first opening plenary. You can triple or quadruple your productivity on grasslands, which means you grow 3 to 4 times more grass, which means you can stock more cattle, and by the way, increase the health of grasslands. And grasslands are 1/3 of the world's land base. So it's a huge and important ecosystem lever that store massive amounts of carbon. And if we can grow more biomass, increase biodiversity, we can suck down a lot of carbon from the atmosphere. I never thought that I would end up becoming a climate change advocate. I just want to help farmers be more productive, right? So my vision, this is Donna Gamarkadar, who's one of the local ranchers in the Bay Area in California that feed me. So my vision is to help her not only make more of what she has on her land base on her ranch, but also to create a knowledge base to other farmers and ranchers and the next generation around the world so that they can share their knowledge and accelerate innovation faster. So right now I feel pretty aligned with what I'm doing in my life, which is serving the farmers and the ranchers who feed me and my loved ones, and also managing and stewarding the ecosystems and landscapes where I come from. Thank you.
So I know we're short on time, so I'm just going to ask you a couple questions. The first one is, well, actually, the first is not a question, it's a thank you. I think our 6-person panel potentially underrepresents the role that late nights and whiskey and campfires play in aha moments, so I'm glad you represent that, and dads.
Yes.
But the question is, we're talking about finding common ground this week. You are an Asian female with 3 Stanford degrees, and I am picturing you showing up, at a ranching conference in Kansas. And I just want to understand, first of all, how does that feel, and then how do you bridge that divide?
Yeah, so my first conference was actually in Columbia, Missouri, in a sea of cowboy hats and big belts, and I walked in, and a kindly old rancher was like, "Ma'am, are you lost?" So finding common ground is actually one of my personal mantras for 2017, and the first thing is showing up. I think with the description of we want to retreat, it's tempting to retreat into our own camps, but I'm very conscious of the privilege that I have as an Asian presenting female entrepreneur, that people regard me with bemused curiosity. And that's an open door, right? I am under no illusion that if I were a Black female founder in rural America, my experience would be very different. And so I think that those of us who have the privilege to walk in through doors that are open to us have the responsibility to walk through those doors and show up and to kick down doors for everybody else to come. And again, I think we're in a unique position right now where there is a lack of talent, and that talent needs to come from somewhere. And urban populations are growing. There are young people, right? And so we're trying to find ways to infiltrate or bring together more people, bridging the urban-rural divide. And I think the first step is using myself as a physical bridge.
That's beautiful. So what's it like to be a mission-oriented startup in Silicon Valley?
Different challenges. Often I find myself reflecting that it's actually easier to be an outsider in rural America, for me personally, than it is in Silicon Valley. And so I think we have a lot of work to do, particularly for young female founders. I don't fit a pattern, and the pattern matching mentality is one that we just have to get out of. It's better to be in a space where people have no pattern to match you to than one where they're looking for what a tech founder looks like and it doesn't look like me. So I think we have a lot of work to do, but for everyone who is a minority or an outsider in some way, we just need to keep showing up.
Okay. What's your favorite U2 song?
City of Blinding Lights.
City of Blinding. Everybody has songs I don't know. Good. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. So we are out of time, so I'm sorry there was no group discussion, but I hope you'll talk to anyone that you're interested in talking to. Thank you for your engaged presence this morning. Our hope was really that all of you are later talking about April 6, 2017 as your aha moment. And we're just really grateful for you being here today. Thank you.